Hello, and welcome back to Living a Culture of Life podcast by Human Life International. I'm your host, Colleen, and today I'm very excited to share our fourth episode on ethical end-of-life care with you. If you missed any of our previous episodes, this is a little mini-series that we're doing in response to the over 200 questions that we received about end-of-life care from a Catholic perspective. On today's episode, Father Shenan Boquet answers questions regarding practical preparation for the end of life. So we discuss POLST Orders, Catholic living wills, durable power of attorney, and advanced medical directives. Father also answers the question about whether or not Catholics can sign a do-not-resuscitate order, and he offers some topics to address with hospice providers when trying to vet who is going to be providing end-of-life care. At the very end of the episode, Father shares two beautiful stories of holy deaths, which I just found so inspirational, and I hope that you enjoy them as well. They're so beautiful. As always, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please subscribe to our show. And if you're listening on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. And as I've mentioned previously, we do have a new ebook on ethical end-of-life care that you can download, and I'll put a link in the description. Without further ado, please welcome Father Boquet to Living a Culture of Life. Welcome to the podcast, Father.
Well, Colleen, always a blessing to be with you and continue our conversations.
Yes. And one thing that you have mentioned in a number of our previous episodes is the importance of having conversations ahead of time regarding end-of-life care. So today I wanted to focus on preparation for end of life, what conversations you should be having, how to vet hospice workers, etc. So to begin with, for this, what kind of conversations do you think are important to have, like just the types of conversations to have as you're preparing for the end of life?
Right. So obviously when I was still in parish ministry, so the homebound, I should say, reaching out to the homebound and, caring for those in skilled care centers or in hospitals or, it's very important. It's one of the, beautiful ministries within the local parish family and caring for those in those situations. So visitation really is of utmost importance. And of course, the parish priest is just one person, or maybe there's a couple of priests, but it's a ministry that really engages the whole of the community because it should involve their family. It should involve their neighbors. The general community should be concerned about the well-being of our brothers and sisters. So when I was still in parish ministry, this is one of the things that was very important to me is our outreach, our relationship building, and especially when I was new to a parish, I didn't know many of the families. So this was also a way to get to know the family. So I bring that up only because in the busyness of parish life, oftentimes or sometimes, this very important outreach doesn't get the attention it deserves. Yeah. And as a result, what happens in many cases, not by ill intent, is that, oftentimes because of not enough personnel, not enough priests, or maybe is that it only when you get a phone call, or, maybe it's the last minute, someone's dying and now you get a call. And so I like to be more proactive, and that's how we approached it. So there's three things I would recommend. So first of all is for my brothers, our parish priests, to be in the homes and visiting, the homebound in the hospitals and the nursing facilities. With that is forming teams. And we formed two separate teams. And I know I've mentioned this before in other podcasts, but, one team was to help me with bringing the sacraments, the Holy Communion to the homebound, especially in both of the last assignments I had, well over 100 people. So it's very hard for one person, to be able to minister to them, and so by forming a team of people, educating and informing them, giving them all the protocols of how to bring Holy Communion, proper liturgy and so forth, really forming them. And then what I would do is I would divide up my team. I would see some, they would see the other, and then we would swap. So basically every other month, I was seeing most of the homebound, if not all of them.
Yeah.
And then we formed a third team. And the third team, consider me being one team, all right?
Yeah.
So the third team, Colleen, were people what I would call who were going to be my outreach team. Okay. So they weren't bringing Holy Communion. They were going for visitations. To sit down, have a cup of coffee, cup of tea, sometimes even for those that liked a cold beer in the evening, whatever it was, just to visit with them, spend time with them, get to know their families. But it was really aimed at praying with them. So going, and especially we had different sodalities, Legion of Mary, you had the Knights of Columbus, you had the Holy Name Society, you had all these various ministries or sodalities and guilds. That what would happen was, so the Knights of Columbus would go out and see theirs, and so pray with them, visit with them, talk to their families. But what we did was, I believe, very important, was to educate them in the ethical and religious directives of Catholic healthcare. That is, to help their ears be attentive and their eyes to see what's happening in the home long before we get to a critical junction, a critical illness. Right now, the main thing is they're not mobile as they once were. So that can be managed for years, right? Yeah. So, but what they did, though, is by listening and then by responding. So if someone would ask a question, hey, Colleen, I was thinking the doctor that they mentioned something about, end of life, wondering, do I have a medical directives? Have I signed anything? Because they would like to know what my positions are, so to speak. And this is where the team would say, okay, well, let's talk about that. And they would be able to help form them. Or if they heard something that was more concerning to them, that they maybe couldn't respond, then I was always informed, and then I would make that part of my conversation with them, and I would come in with maybe some medical directives, from a Catholic point and perspective. I'd come in and answer their questions about, different things about end of life, or maybe, medical pain management or something. So this is a way of having dialogue. And what I found is it was so much better toward the end, because the family was educated, the patient was educated, they knew the moral obligations, and if they had any doubts, they knew who to call, they knew that I would be there to help them, and the team was there caring for them. And one last thing is that also what I would say with that team mentality was, so very much like palliative care. It's kind of how I approached it. We weren't providing medical care, we weren't providing nursing care, we were providing, the spiritual and, and the accompaniment and, not having anyone isolated. But what would happen was when things began to start changing, the team was very aware, Father, you might want to pay an extra visit this week. Miss so-and-so is not doing very well. It looks like things are starting to, change. So obviously going in with, the prayers of the church, the anointings, bringing viaticum, maybe if they're getting to that stage, so now the processes have changed and the responses are changing. But it's not a single event. You've been doing this for so long now. They know you're in their homes. They expect you to be in their home. They want you in their home, or at their bedside in the hospital or skilled facility. So it's really about family, Colleen. This is really what it's about.
Yeah, it sounds like at that
Sorry
point,
to be a little long with that, but yeah.
No, it sounds like you're saying that you basically had the relationship built up. So from the audience member perspective, that's helpful for any priest that may be listening or people who are more actively involved in their parish ministries. From the audience perspective of people either potentially preparing for their own end of life or who are helping take care of an elderly relative, what are some things that they should be thinking of, conversations to either have with the patient, or if the patient themselves is listening, conversations they should be having with family member and friends around them?
Well, what I would first say is long before we all get to these stages of life, the older we become, the inevitability is upon us, right? But, even for our young people, it's important, even for a young couple like yourself, newly married, is to talk about, these things. Why? Because life throws us many curveballs that we're not expecting. But what we're talking about, obviously, is people we know that are on this particular trajectory. Yeah. So what I always encourage is to talk about this. So for parents who are in that stage of life, to be able to talk to their children, or to their caregivers, that we're not able to welcome children, But the idea is identifying a moment of conversation about what are the moral obligations toward the protection of human life, the service of human life. And remember, we have that obligation to the end. We can do nothing to hasten our death, and that means either by omission, so not doing something we should be doing, right? Ordinary care, or we have done something to actually cause the speeding up, the hastening of death. We cannot do that. So there's always kind of like that specter of euthanasia that we have to really fight against, right? True. And sadly, it's infiltrated in healthcare. It's infiltrated, sadly, in some palliative care facilities. And so these are very important to talk about. So what I'm saying here is, as a family, as the patient, or as a family member caring for a loved one, right, is to have this conversation before we ever get anywhere near the need, so that we begin to understand each other. So, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I'm assuming that probably looks a lot like educating yourselves in these topics, which is what we're hoping this video series does, this podcast series, and our ebook as well. So being aware of what does the church teach, what resources are available that I can turn to if I have questions.
Exactly.
What do the ethical and religious directives say on these topics, things like that.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And just being able to bring them up. So, for example, I got a very dear friend of mine. She's now in her late 90s. Still very vibrant. It's amazing. She's so mindful and so thankful that the Lord has blessed her with such an old age, and still being able to be active. Her mind is still sharp. She's still able to be mobile. She gets out. So that doesn't happen for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And so, but she's also mindful because she's asked questions of me. She says, okay, now can you help me so I can, is there something I should be reading? Can you send me something that the church uses to help in these advanced medical directives? Or how do I identify what we call a surrogate, or what we call a proxy? So that when she can't speak for herself, who has she given authority to? Some people call it durable power of attorney, so an advanced medical directive, a will, end of life will. But, and we'll talk more about this.
That was going to be my follow-up.
But the idea is that to be able to present to them a document, which there are many that are there that are very good. The Catholic Medical Association has a Catholic medical directives. The National Catholic Bioethics Center has beautiful end of life directives. The Knights of Columbus have one that I use often and recommend to people. So there are those that guide us in our decision making. Remember that even though we're now moving toward the latter part of life, that we still have a moral duty to be stewards of our life, and that which is considered ordinary care must always be provided. And then as we're making decisions, Colleen, about those medical interventions that we are considering, are they beneficial? Are they becoming more excessive and burdensome? So those are the questions that may lead us into extraordinary care, disproportionate care. But for the family is to sit down. I mean, I've already had some conversation with my own parents, right, who are in their 80s, right? And though sometimes they don't want to talk about those kind of things, I make them in a way, not make them, but, we talk about it because it's important to hear, for them to hear from me, and also to be able to ask questions. And as I've done with family members that may be uncomfortable talking to me, I make recommendations. They talk to their parish priest. It's important to have a conversation, I guess, is my main point here.
Yeah.
And so now to the other point you were bringing up now is in the sense of how to identify. I like what you said, and that is, what do the Catholic teachings, principles teach us? Where can I find those teachings? You just mentioned the ethical and religious directives for Catholic healthcare. If there's a real serious question and for some reason my parish priest or my deacon or someone just can't seem to give me a direction on this, we've mentioned before in our other podcast, the National Catholic Bioethics Center hotline, a 24-hour hotline. There could be a very unique situation I need help with, all right? So availing myself and having all that information handy. I would say have it at your bedside, put it in your little nightstand, and you tell your family, hey, this is where you'll find this phone number if you need a question answered. If I can't ask it myself, it's just important to have a conversation. Because many people don't, Colleen.
Now, the different types of legal documents or documents in general that people fill out, that people had questions on, kind of tended to fall into a few different categories. So you had living will, you had the durable power of attorney, and then POLST forms. Could you just explain a little bit of what each one of those is, and then which one is the most recommended?
Right. Well, what's happening now is, as healthcare, so many people are facing from their doctors. I mean, you can go to the doctor and they want to give you what's called basically a physician's order in life-sustaining treatment. All right.
Okay.
So POLST.
Okay.
You hear, or you hear POLST with an M, which is basically medical, but it's just the same thing. Basically, what is the order that I have given, in a sense, to my caregiver, that the physician has signed, I have signed, that kind of outlines, all right? But there are problems with this, all right?
Okay.
And so we'll talk a little bit about what those are. When we talk about, in a sense of a living will, well, there are many out there, all right, and there many of them are subject to moral questions,
Okay.
all right. The durable power of attorney is just exactly what it means. That basically I have empowered someone when I'm no longer capable of speaking or defending myself, that they have the authority on my behalf, a proxy, a surrogate, right? So we'll come back to that as well. Okay, so let's look at how the church would like us to approach this. First of all, that if we look at, with POLST, so that physician order for life-sustaining treatment, by itself, in itself, all right, remember that a medical act is not necessarily always a moral act. So medical decision-making is not necessarily moral decision-making. They're different.
Okay.
Right? So why we do something medically is not always something maybe morally right, or it could be morally wrong.
Okay.
Right? So we have an obligation. What I mean by that is,
I was going to ask a
so
clarification.
that, let's say that, a medical act is to remove food and water.
Okay.
Okay. So what do we know about that automatically is that food and water are not medical care.
Okay.
They're ordinary care unless the food and water itself is no longer beneficial to the patient or has become excessive because of, again, merits of a case. But for some people that, they just will sign a document saying, I don't want to, receive, food and water when it's no longer, toward the end of life. But there's nothing really to outline what does that mean. So you got to be very careful here. So that's why moral decision making, it always starts with life is a good, life is a value, and it must be always defended and protected and served at every stage of its journey, especially as we move toward the end of life, right? So what's important here, but medicine is not always looking at it from that perspective, right? Because they may be looking at it from an efficiency point of view, from a quality of life point of view, from a kind of a transactional point of view, right? We don't look at it this way, right? Life is a good, it must be served. The questions really become, is that how does this benefit, or is this benefit no longer beneficial, and has it become excessive and burdensome? So we look at, is it moved from ordinary care to maybe extraordinary care? Yeah. Those are the questions that we're asking, all right?
Yeah.
So, and that's where, again, when you go back to your previous question was, how does a family, how does a patient, the person, but it's about asking those questions, and that's where, again, having that relationship with your caregivers is important.
So you basically need the flexibility to be able to discern as situations arise what the moral action is. And so the issue with POLST is that it's almost too, it's not flexible.
Some say, I don't like using the word rigid, but in the sense that because it's a form, and what you're doing is you're ticking boxes. Well, a box doesn't explain the moral implications. And what you might tick today may be very different tomorrow. Okay. So we're not saying that the church would not say, when you read some of the like NCBC, National Catholic Bioethics Center, or even the Catholic Medical Association, when it comes to POLST or MOLST, what you hear is there's just questions, because it really doesn't satisfy all the principles of how we would recommend medical directives.
So would it be immoral to use, or would it just be not necessarily recommended?
I would caution people, and I have done so. Okay. Is for what the church would really want is that their Catholic medical directives, like for example, mine are several pages long. Okay. All right. Into the dozens of pages. Right. Yeah. And what it's done is, in the proxy, a person I have delegated to speak on my behalf, we've walked through those protocols, right? Okay. And so this person always is being a Catholic, understands the principles. We've gone through those principles. We've discussed them, and obviously we were on the same page before, all right? Because it's a priest, all right? Yeah. We talked about this before, he and I. So and I serve as his proxy. Okay. Right. And so basically it's just walking through those directives and making sure there's any questions, and talking. And so the principles don't change.
Okay.
Those principles guide us. But each case is really the merits of that case present themselves at a given moment that could change. So again, why? Because we're looking at it from ordinary, extraordinary, proportionate care, disproportionate care, as we've talked about in our podcast before. And so that's how we're evaluating.
So
right?
it sounds like what you're saying is that the POLST forms have limitations because
Yes.
it's a form.
Right.
The proxy, that's the same as the durable power of attorney?
That's a legal terminology, durable power of attorney, right.
Yeah, so that's the best option
The surrogate, the
because
proxy.
that person can be aware of your wishes and can make decisions based off of the church's teachings in the moment and best discern the best action forward in
Is
the
the
moment.
moral decision maker, and also from the civil point is the legal decision maker.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's very important to have that. So even if I didn't have a written medical directive out, my proxy would still know exactly what my values are as a Catholic, what principles are to be followed. The medical directives, advanced directives, kind of give them a guideline. So there's ever any question. So because not everybody will be familiar with everything.
And is the medical directive that you're talking about, is that the same thing as or is that a form of a living will?
So not so much a living will. The idea is it's a document that helps the individual to know what principles they're going to follow as a Catholic.
Okay.
Right. And, living wills, again, because what happens in most living wills, you're assuming things that you don't even know yet.
Okay.
You're assuming that this situation is going to present itself. For example, it could be a box with a big paragraph in it that says, I do not want to be on life-sustaining treatment. What does that mean? Right? That's just a statement. Right? So if now maybe let's say it adds on, maybe there's a semicolon and it goes on, when there is no benefit to me. Well, again, what do we mean by benefit?
Okay.
Right? So there are lots of questions that get posed in here. Right? So what's important with the Catholic medical directive for Catholics, and it actually it's not just for Catholics, because protecting life belongs to all of us. But what it does is it helps educate a person in those principles. Okay. And that, to me, is what I did in the home visitations.
Gotcha.
Is to help the family, help the patient. In that case, it wasn't a patient, it was a parishioner, right?
Yeah.
But to understand what is ordinary care, right? Now, and some people love to tell you, well, what about so hold on, what's the principle? What does it mean? Okay. So what we're talking about is that which is to be given. Okay. So that the benefit far outweighs the burdensomeness and the excessiveness, and that the patient benefits from this care, right? So that is what should guide the decision. Okay. So whether we're talking about, should I give CPR? Should I have a DNR, do-not-resuscitate order? Should I, have this intervention of a ventilator? Should I continue my dialysis? These are all questions that come back to those principles, Colleen. Okay. And by using those principles, it brings light into that conversation. Gotcha. And what I mean by individual case is not circumstances, but the merits of that case. Because what may affect you in that same kind of scenario may be very different from me under the same circumstance.
So basically you want an advanced medical directive and a proxy. And the two go together, and that's the strongest.
Especially the proxy.
Okay.
But the advanced medical directive from the Catholic is like we have with our ebook. It provides structure. It provides conversation. It gives guidelines to the proxy. That's been discussed already with the person, and that it helps them understand when they come to these decisions what is the mindset and the framework of the Catholic. Okay. And what's the mindset, obviously, of the person that I'm speaking on behalf of? It's very, very important. Yeah. And what I have found in parish ministry, and even as a priest of now in my 34th year, I still face these situations because people will ask questions. I mean, a lot of times, even in airports recently, someone pulled me aside, Father, can I ask a question of you? Yeah. And it happened to do with an end-of-life decision. Yeah. So we are all confronted with this. So I always advise the sooner to have this conversation, the better, because then you can bring light onto the situation and kind of bring out the confusion. There's a lot of confusion about what I'm supposed to do and not do.
Well, and it also sounds like that's very charitable towards the proxy as well, because you've given them, you're able to like talk about and provide a structure so that they have a better understanding. So it's not like them being put on the spot being like, oh, shoot, I'm not sure
Right.
the best thing to do here. It's like you've talked
Right.
about it, you have a structure, and then you're minimizing the amount of like decisions they'll have to make without necessarily knowing what you want.
Remember, not going into all the detail again, but in our last podcast, I talked about Father Frank Papa.
Yes.
All right. And it's a good example of this.
Mm-hmm.
So when Father Papa, who was HLI's chaplain for about 10 years, a little over 10 years, began to have medical problems and to the point where he needed more care than what I could provide to him here in HLI's living quarters. And so, but because Father and I had always had these conversations, and I was his proxy. And so I would speak for him when he could not. And so when a situation unfolded the last day of his life, a decision had to be made on a surgical procedure. And in the given moment, as I shared in the last podcast in greater detail, that when the surgeon and I were discussing what were the options, because I knew him well enough to know that, my life is of value. Do whatever you can, you believe is the best for me, and making sure that we do nothing to hasten my death, obviously, and do not omit anything that would be considered ordinary and responsible care, for the value of my life. And so the surgeon and I believed that even though it was a very critical, very serious, that she believed that the best interest of him was to bring him into surgery and try to repair the damage that had presented itself. When they got into surgery, what she found was very much different. And so when she came out within a very short period and said to me, I would never have gone this path if we had known what we would have found once we started getting into the case. And so decisions change that quickly. And the best thing we could do, because we could do nothing else for him. There's nothing surgically she could do to resolve what had unfolded. And so now what we do is we give tender, loving care. All right. And so these are that's what I mean by the merits. All right. And I've been in those situations with family, with friends, with people for parishioners that, that's why I love the conversation about what is my moral responsibility. And my moral responsibility doesn't go away. Even when there's nothing that science and medicine can do, I still have a moral duty toward this individual. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure, because I know it's such a delicate time in people's lives.
Is the Catholic Advanced Medical Directive the proper place to also request a priest if you are close to death?
So that's a very good point, because let's go back to our discussion about palliative care. So when we look at how there's a totality of approach of caring for the individual who still has curative benefits from interventions and medical care, right? So, but that overarching umbrella is everyone has a part to play, and equally as serving the good of the person. You bring up the very important part of the spiritual side, all right? And so when we look at the Catholic medical directives, what we're also looking at is redemptive suffering. So we talk about what that means and what the church understands, all right, in that. And then we look at also making sure that the person is availing themselves to the sacraments. Because why? We also have an end in view. And the end is not the finality of this world in itself alone, but the resurrection, eternal life. So we're helping and accompanying a soul toward that moment, what I would say the church says, this encounter with the risen Lord, right? So yes, absolutely, the Catholic medical directives will include, in that conversation, I want to have these provided to me. If I'm in this hospital, I want these provided to me, So these are very important, or if I'm in a skilled center or I'm homebound. So yes, absolutely.
And then how would you, Maureen asked in the questions how you would go about preparing documents following Catholic teachings for the proxy and in this situation. So do you
Right.
have any places people can turn to download a good advanced medical directive, or places you would point them how
Exactly.
they'd go about that
Yeah.
process?
So as I mentioned a little earlier, so just it's always good to be repetitive.
Yeah.
Because so the National Catholic Bioethics Center
Okay.
has on their website you can find a Catholic medical directive. The Catholic Medical Association, Colleen, has again very good medical directives, and there's nothing really different between them. It's just that how things might be explained, the way they organize the thought, and that Knights of Columbus actually have a very good, also a very good one.
Okay.
Some are just a little shorter, some a little longer. Mine's much longer because I'm just making sure all the other things are in there that we want to talk about. But the idea is those are good sources.
Okay.
Right. So, but once you have it, it's sitting down. So I would say to Maureen, if you're dealing with a loved one, or maybe it's yourself, is read it. Because sometimes we find out, oh, I didn't know that, so that's good.
Yeah.
And that's what goes back to when we first started with, when I would sit down with people in their homes, is by talking through it, you can see that kind of aha moment. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that makes sense. It allows people to take ownership. And they begin to realize, oh, I have a moral obligation here. I need to make sure. And then you begin to ask yourself, wait a minute, if I have a moral obligation, then how do I ensure that? Well, a piece of paper is not going to do it by itself.
Yeah.
Right? Because it never will capture everything.
Yeah.
Right? Because what the medical directives do is outline, Colleen, principles.
Yeah.
Right? They don't give every scenario because you can't. There's no such thing as knowing every scenario and understanding what will happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know what's going to happen 5 minutes from now. So, but the directives give us the principles, the mindset, kind of the framework upon which to act. And that's what's important. So once you have it, Maureen, what I would say, sit down, read through it.
Okay.
Jot down questions that you might have, and then finding someone, parish priest, or maybe, you might be a bioethicist in the community. Again, reaching out to us, whatever, is ask the question, okay, what does this mean? Right? And then making sure there's clarity, because oftentimes when there's a question, Colleen, is because they're faced with something. It touches where they are.
Yeah.
And so, for example, it could be food and water. No one's ever spoke to them about.
Yeah.
It could be, well, what's the difference between ordinary and extraordinary care? I mean, I can read paragraph 56 and paragraph 57 of the ethical and religious directives, but what does that mean? So it's just to understand it, which is what we've been trying to do over the last few podcasts, try to give it some flesh.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the starting point. Then think, so who would really serve as a proxy?
Okay.
And you can always change a proxy. I mean, because I've had to change my proxy because one passed away. So I mean, so I had to find someone new. And so, but spouses often assume it's their spouse, and of course legally that's usually the case. But what happens if both happen to be in a situation where they're both unconscious, right? And so who's the decision maker here? All right. So these are very important, and each state's legal system is unique.
Yeah.
So that's why we can't speak to every situation. But it's important to understand, and also what's important is to communicate where my Catholic medical directives are located. All right. So let's just say that, for example, the proxy is across the planet.
Yeah.
All right. So those things are important too, maybe for other family members that may not be the proxy, might be the oldest sister, could be the oldest brother, could be the youngest one. I always recommend a second.
Okay.
Personally, because again, life is so complicated. And if I happen, for me, I'm proxy surrogate for a number of people, right? And including some bishops, some priests. And I communicated very clearly because I travel around the world.
Yeah.
Are you sure about this? Because I may be completely on the other side of the planet and inaccessible. And so I'm happy to serve, but can we also have a secondary that for some reason, if I'm completely unreachable, right? So this it's again why? Because life is a value.
Okay, to build on that part of the conversation, we did receive a question about what to do if you don't necessarily have trusted individuals in your life.
Uh,
So, say your spouse has passed away and you don't have
mhm.
any children, or you do have children, but you're unsure if they'll actually follow church teaching when it comes to this care. What if you don't have any like close friends around you who are Catholic? Like, where can you turn to look for a proxy if there's nobody in your immediate life who you trust to serve as
Right.
proxy?
That's a hard one to answer, Colleen, because I would say that we all have people we trust,
Okay.
right? It's finding someone, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a Catholic, okay?
Okay.
But a person that you trust
To,
adhere to these Catholic principles
okay.
that you know and believe will
Hmm.
follow them. And that's trust,
Hmm.
right? So it really is identifying
Hmm.
someone or two people to serve the value of your life and
Hmm.
to respect your life to its very end. And so I would say, that we all have people that fit that bill to some degree.
Okay.
Some may not. I mean, it could be circumstances out there, but what do you do? The
Hmm.
reason why, and I mean, now this is going to be out there, but I'm not giving any names. So, but the reason why I serve as proxy for some people is because of a similar situation
Hmm.
that they really don't have that level of trust, with others within their circle,
Yeah.
right? So they identified someone outside of that circle, in
Hmm.
this case, me, all right, to serve in that capacity. Now, that doesn't mean they don't love the people in their life. It just means
Yeah.
that there's something here of a nature that just demanded a different kind of response.
Hmm.
All right. So that also can be done. But you really do ideally want someone that people who know,
Hmm.
right? That's not a stranger to the family or so forth, but that, that's been, because normally, the proxy surrogate is going to be close enough. They're already part of their lives
Hmm.
and people have been seeing them. And in some cases, it's important to identify them, right?
Yeah.
So in that circle, you're saying, hey, by the way, Frank is my proxy. Just in case you all don't know, I'm
Hmm.
letting you know that,
Yeah.
right? So, or the doctor, it's important to know, or
Hmm.
the nurse, or hey, Frank is my proxy. So
Hmm.
if for some reason I'm incapable, excuse me, of I'm not responding, Frank is my proxy. He is my surrogate. Legally, he's my durable power of attorney,
Okay.
right? So that now has cleared the air,
Yeah.
right? And so that is very important too, communicating.
Hmm.
So not just, having something out there, you want to make sure that you've communicated it
Hmm.
and also have something that's legally binding.
Yeah. Somebody else asked, just kind of along the lines of legal documents, if there's a way to request Catholic palliative care in that, or would that just be something that you either discern for yourself or tell the proxy that you want to make sure that your palliative or hospice care provider
Right.
adheres to church teaching?
That's correct. Same principles involved.
Okay.
So that's where again a Catholic medical directive comes into play.
Okay, so you can
So
specify it in
right,
there.
right.
Okay.
Especially, because life can change so quickly,
Hmm.
and when you're able to voice for yourself, but then all of a sudden you are no longer able to speak on your behalf.
Okay.
So that's why the Catholic medical directive gives those principles,
Hmm.
and then having the surrogate proxy being able to employ that.
Yeah.
So that's what's also important. So absolutely, and I mean in mine, for example, because they're written in a general format,
Hmm.
right? But there's a whole section on if I'm pregnant,
Hmm.
right? Well, it doesn't apply to me at all. All right. So but that's why I bring it up only because I'm saying is that those Catholic medical directives that you're going to find are written on the principle level,
Okay.
guiding us through those decision making.
Hmm.
And some things will apply,
Hmm.
some things won't apply. The
Yeah.
one on if I happen to be with child,
Hmm.
that doesn't apply to me, but it
Yeah.
would apply to you.
Yeah.
Right. So there's something very different here. So that's why it's good to read them and walk through them. And by working with especially if you're going to have a legal approach in a sense to it, something that's going to be signed, something that's going to be legally binding, if you will, then what you want to make sure is that the language is reflecting
Yeah.
that everything that's applicable to you.
Hmm.
So when I met with the attorney to walk through that,
Hmm.
so that we make sure that everything is legal, that I removed the sections that don't apply to me,
Yeah.
right? So that doesn't cause any confusion.
Just along the lines of documents and like guidance from a Catholic perspective, are Catholics allowed to have do not resuscitate like consents, or like what's the church guidance around that?
Right. So again, we're coming back to the ethical and religious directives.
Mm-hmm.
We're coming back to paragraphs 56 and 57,
Okay.
where we're looking at ordinary
Mm-hmm.
back to extraordinary. So proportionate and disproportionate. So let me just give a little scenario that we talk about in our ebook, right?
Okay.
We give a couple of good examples.
Yeah.
So let me come back, to remember our conversation about the ventilator.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That was one of our episodes. And so we talked about how we remember that the ventilator provides a benefit when a
Mm-hmm.
person is not able to their lungs are not able to expand, the diaphragm is not able to help. So this external machine assists in providing oxygen to the body and oxygenation of the cells and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we have a person that's in an accident,
Mm-hmm.
right? And my example I used, I believe, was a young woman with pneumonia,
Okay.
right? But what the doctors believe is that we can heal the pneumonia, and what she needs is just time for her body to heal.
Yeah.
And the ventilator provides a benefit that's not excessive and burdensome, and the outcome is something good that we believe that we can achieve.
Yeah.
Right? So it provides a benefit.
And that would be ordinary care.
That's correct.
Okay.
And so because of that, that is considered ordinary care.
Yeah.
But now we can have an individual that has had multiple strokes. The difficulties are affecting other vital organs. Life is changing. And so the doctors, after an assessment of time, so immediately he's placed on a ventilator to assist him because his body cannot do it on its own. So, but then as we've assessed, we've done medical tests, we've been looking at, we've been evaluating, and we realize that the strokes have been so damaging and that there is no reversing their outcomes, and they're only going to get worse as time goes forward, and they start expressing, well, now the ventilator is not providing a benefit. It has an immediate benefit, but its benefit in a sense of, as the first case, is not the same. And so the family, based upon that, could determine that the ventilator is now extraordinary, and that basically the person is dying from the stroke, from the damage from the stroke, not from the removal or withdrawal of the ventilator, right? So it's because of the strokes or the damage caused by that, all right? So here we have a similar situation because when we talk about a do not resuscitate, which goes back to POLST, and when you look at something like this, I tick a box, all right? I do not want to be resuscitated, all right? Some forms may have this. Well, what does that mean, right? I can fall down the stairs and have some damage, but like the first case with the ventilator, the prognosis is positive. We believe that things. So yeah, I mean, I would want someone. There's nothing in my life that would prevent me from having CPR, having someone assist me to come back from this moment, whatever it is. But let's turn now to another scenario where we might be dealing with someone, and it's not because of age, but age now is part of it, whose bones are brittle, who's reaching maybe toward an end of life, and for someone to come in and literally to do some type of compression could cause more harm, could break ribs, could inflict some severe pain. So those are different ways of approach. So here again we're back to, so it can be moral. That's why can be moral to have a do not resuscitate order. It may be illicit to have a do not resuscitate order.
And it's just a case-by-case basis of evaluating whether or not the care in that case would be ordinary or extraordinary.
So again, back to, if I may use my own family, my own grandfather. So we talked about this using the ventilator. But let's say that he was not being assisted with a ventilator. Now he had a surgery, and sadly he threw a blood clot, and complications began to emerge. So, but let's just say that he had not been. Let's say he had been the ventilator had been withdrawn because he seemed to be doing well. He was improving, right? But let's just say that but the doctors were saying, look, we're still not out of the woods. There's a lot of still severity happening here. This is the damage that's been done, so forth and so on. And just they say that it continues to show that his vital signs continue to change. So what do you all want to do? That right now the damage that we didn't think was so severe is quite severe. There's nothing we can do to alter that. His vital signs are going to continue to deteriorate, which means death is approaching. It's imminent. All right. And so, do you want us to do a resuscitation if he codes? Right? There's a case. Right?
Yeah.
Now, so can I do it? Okay. Should I do it? Two very different questions. But what's important is, again, looking at that ordinary and extraordinary. And I would say that looking at, like our ebook, it kind of explains.
Yeah.
When you're looking at someone, not because of their age alone, but the age along with the other symptoms, the other assessments and evaluations, it may be moral not to have a DNR, right? To have a DNR, do not resuscitate, right?
To not be resuscitated.
But in a different scenario that we give in the very beginning, it is ordinary and it should be given.
Yeah.
So it's important to use those terms, Colleen, which our ebook does a very good job in doing, and just trying to guide people on those principles.
Yeah.
And that's why we go back to what we started with, is why signing forms that are just ordinary, just ticking boxes, doesn't satisfy our Catholic perspectives. We should be leery of signing such a document.
Of something very static. That
Right.
Yeah.
Static is a good word.
Yeah. And so for the end of this conversation, I wanted to talk about evaluating palliative and or hospice, because hospice is kind of under the umbrella of palliative, evaluating a provider. So what type of questions should you ask? What should you be looking for? How do you make sure that the person who will be providing palliative or hospice care will respect and adhere to the Catholic principles? So either for family members or for the patient themselves, what should they be asking? What should they be looking for? What should they ensure will be provided to them?
Okay. So let's return to when we talked about, when I was sharing with you my parish ministry experiences.
Okay.
It's the same approach here. So when these moments are approaching and we need to address palliative care, we should, again, using those Catholic principles, using the advanced Catholic medical directives, if you will, using those principles to guide me in how I interview providers. And what I want people to understand is we're not doing the provider a favor. They're providing a service to us. So we should never be embarrassed or ashamed to share our principles. All the more we should stand and find those that will respect our principles, will adhere to those principles, and will honor what we ask of them. And that's why it should be a conversation. So if we have some directives in front of us, like we do with any interview, you interview the person or the group, and you say, tell me, this is what I believe. So you give them, and you discuss them. Can you provide this? Will you respect this? And let's say that they can't. Well, sorry.
Yeah.
All right. So, but let's just say I happen to be in a remote area and I only have very limited options. Remember that the palliative group is providing a service to you. That's where your proxy and your family have to step in and provide what they cannot provide.
Okay.
All right. And so, but there, remember, palliative care is involving the doctor, the nurse, the chaplain, the family members. It's involving everyone. So it's having a conversation, not just with one entity.
Yeah.
It's everybody that is being spoken to. And so starting word is interview.
Okay.
Talk it out. Find that entity that you believe adheres to these principles and will respect them. And also, and that's when you identify, and Frank is my proxy. He is, for a legal point, my durable power of attorney. Frank will speak for me when I'm incapable of speaking for myself. So you're making it clear this is the kind of how this process will work, right? Now, in palliative care, remember, we still have a person that's still functioning, and right. So, but as we get a little further in, where the curative dimension is now no longer present, and we move into the stage of hospice, right? So, but we still have that totality of approach. But now our questions move from ordinary, right, now to looking at things that may be extraordinary. And so that's a different conversation.
So examples of things you want to ask questions about would be nutrition, hydration.
That's right.
Will you provide IV nutrition
Right.
and nutrition and
That's right.
hydration?
You know, exactly.
So making sure that the patient won't end up being starved or
Yeah,
dehydrated.
tell me how you handle pain management. Tell me how you handle the issue of food and water.
Mhm.
How do you handle, what about a DNR? How do you handle if I need the sacraments? Again, we might be dealing with a non-Catholic entity.
Yeah.
Who's will you have access? I mean, let's just say I'm moving 100 miles from my parish.
Mhm.
I'm not going to expect my parish priest, to come out so easily,
Mhm.
right? I still hope he will come and visit me, all right? But who's the nearest? Can we get a conversation? Will they come out if you call them?
Mhm.
We should be asking those questions, all right?
Okay.
And being able to identify, where the strengths, where the weaknesses, and begin to say, okay, do the strengths outnumber any weakness, and will they honor the moral responsibility that I have? Will they respect that?
Mhm.
Those are questions that need to be posed.
One of the things that Dr. Joseph Meany said is that the NCBC requires that, or insists that the hospice providers allow for the IV and nutrition and hydration if
Correct.
necessary to keep the patient alive, and also that they respect the pain management wishes of the family.
That's right.
So, and the patient, obviously.
That's right.
So those were just two things that he specifically brought up that I thought would be helpful for our audience to know. That,
Good. Yeah, absolutely. Because I think, again, most people don't think and believe that food and water are ordinary care.
There were people who sent us emails about situations where, I mean, obviously I didn't know all the details of the situation,
Right.
but from what they described, it sounded like the hospice provider did not respect the food
Right.
and water.
That's right.
And some people were expressing concern that Medicare pays for hospice, and the shorter amount of time that people are on hospice, the more money the provider makes. So do you have any recommendations for how to ensure that proper care is provided in that kind of situation? Oversight.
Constant vigilance. And so why what I said earlier, the specter of euthanasia is always around.
How do you provide that oversight if you don't have medical knowledge?
So it's not here necessarily always medical knowledge. It's
Okay.
just care. Visiting, having someone always with you,
Mhm.
especially when you become more vulnerable,
Mhm.
and also knowing the staff.
Mhm.
Knowing the people who are caring for you.
Yeah.
We all can pick up on anything that's there. And, you get to know. Remember, I shared the example before, of a friend that was dealing with a daughter who was in a terminal illness.
Mhm.
And so different country, and the ways of approach of healthcare, a little different. And so then we would find here in the States.
Mhm.
And so because of socialized medicine,
Mhm.
and the person came in and was talking about pain management, but in reality was, in a sense, wanting to give more higher dosages. But a
Mhm.
lot of times what it came down to was the communication. So there was this fear
Mhm.
that the mother had legitimately,
Yeah.
that we don't want to do anything to hasten,
Mhm.
right? At the same time, that my daughter needs pain management,
Mhm.
all right? So we're not saying that she doesn't have a need, but so by talking it out and making
Mhm.
it clear, and then always that vigilance,
Mhm.
it's very, very important that we don't, the church has a beautiful way of understanding this, is that I don't give my moral obligation to another.
Yeah.
Right? Right? Unless, that individual, unless there's no other recourse. What I mean by that, like a parent
Yeah.
cannot render to another person their own duties and obligations.
It's toward their
Right?
child.
Right.
Yeah.
So here is the idea. This is a family member, a friend. We have a moral obligation to them,
Mhm.
especially when they are vulnerable.
Yeah.
So we need to do have our diligence and be
Mhm.
vigilant in our care and oversight to ensure that all the things that are of value and moral obligation are being fulfilled. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So that to me is what is utmost here.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to give that away to
Mhm.
someone else. So I can't blame anyone else if something were to occur.
Mhm.
So vigilance is important. Communication is important. Asking questions, right?
Mhm.
And as we talked about in our last podcast, when we talked about pain management, the idea is asking those questions,
Mhm.
and observation. Has my loved one become more agitated? Are they anxious? Are things changing? Is the pain becoming unbearable? Is it intolerable? But also it's coming back to the spiritual that you brought up earlier. How do we recognize the opportunities for redemptive suffering? How do we recognize the importance of praying together and having the sacraments available and having our pastor come out and visit us, and talking about these things are so important. So we need all of that to come together.
No, I hope that's helpful for our audience, of just like being able to have good communication, vet these things, make sure that you're the provider understands the patient and the family's, the proxies, requirements for care, and being able to just be able to have those conversations and make sure that there's clarity, and you're not just
if we look at a beautiful word of pilgrimage, isn't it what we're ultimately talking about? So even when there is, in a sense, no illness, there's no age-related issue, life seems to be healthy and strong, I still should have these conversations. So because life is a pilgrimage, and so how we are serving our lives, this is part of serving. This is part of being a steward of one's life, and recognizing the importance of protecting that value, even when there's no direct threat in the given moment. And so this is how I approach the homebound, but really this is how the family members learned, because what I found was the family members were filled with questions themselves. And so it's helping them as well, who are not in that situation for themselves physically.
It sounds like it's just the education and the just becoming more familiar with principles and being able to have just conversations about this ahead of time is just so important, instead of just living your life and then being blindsided when something happens.
And having that pilgrim mentality means that we are fellow sojourners. So we're on a journey, and we are accompanying each other to this moment of encounter with the risen Lord. This is what we're moving toward. And so when we keep that mentality, then we realize that every stage of that journey employs moral decision making that are keeping that end in mind, that whatever I do affects this end. And to help a soul to prepare for that moment is the greatest gift that I can give someone. And so seeing that all the way through that journey, seeing it, and that means that's why every person plays a part. They're given part in that pilgrimage to bring that soul to this moment, to bring them. And in a way, you're introducing them to Jesus. You're helping to present them to the Lord.
I love that.
And this is the way the church looks at this. And it's the way we should look at it. And that's why when we talk about the harms, they are harms. And that's why even false compassion can get in the way, and if we over-sedate purposely, intentionally, if we make someone unconscious intentionally because of a false sense of compassion, what are we possibly depriving of them? An ability to reconcile, to seek reconciliation as a Catholic, to go to confession, to confess one's sins, to be verbal with Father when he comes for the anointing, to participate in their journey. We're depriving them of this. And that's why it's false compassion, and not having the totality, Colleen, of that vision is what brings harm. So, and sometimes it's the person themselves that need it to be enlightened, but in most cases, it's everyone else around them that need to be enlightened. And so that's why we must approach. And I love how you're bringing it to the end by, what questions, what should I be asking? This is what we should be asking. What I just kind of expressed. That is the mindset. And so that is how everything else should be posed. How is this act helping this person face our Lord? And how am I helping to present them? So have my actions help this person on that journey? So these are all part of that decision making. But the principles anchor us, and the right persons who share those values assist us. And when others have that same value in there, we're all working toward the same end. It's
wonderful.
Just a thought, it's in the sense of how to approach.
No, I love that. It's a very helpful framework to have, just like walking with someone to the gates of heaven and being able to help present them to our Lord at death. So
Amen.
So I love hearing stories of holy deaths. They're just very hopeful and inspiring and just so beautiful. So.
Exactly. And if you know what, I'll tell you one story, and
Okay.
you can, and that'll be about what you just expressed. So this beautiful soul who gave she and her husband brought in a beautiful family. One of their sons is a priest and is religious. And I happened to visit them quite often, when they were preparing for death. And, in a beautiful moment, so you had all the teams I talked about in the beginning, right? So the parish priest was there, the team that had brought them Holy Communion were there, and the team that was visiting on a regular basis to pray, because this person belonged to many of the sodalities and guilds. They were all in that room with all that family praying. It was awesome. So beautiful. And this person had been somewhat unconscious the last couple of days, though you could tell, listening, hearing, but no really major response. So as we're praying the rosary at a big, big, beautiful window looking outside, and all of a sudden this tree gets filled with all these doves. And no one is, and all the family said, we've never seen this before. And all of a sudden, she sits up in this bed with this big, beautiful smile and just kind of looks around a little bit, just smiles, and then lays down and she's gone. Now, there are so many grace moments. And since I told that one, I'll tell one more. And that is similar situation, but not with doves or trees, nighttime. And this beautiful soul I had accompanied from the moment they began getting seriously ill. I had just come to the parish. So I had only got to know them in a very short window, but it was very clear to me, a spiritual soul, family, so beautiful. And so I had been visiting several times, but now the journey was coming to an end. So it was early in the night, morning, I should say. And so I'm there. We're doing the prayers for the dying. We're praying the rosary. We're just holding hands with the individual. And all of a sudden, and I happen to be holding one his hand, and the wife was on the other side with all the kids, and just kind of can feel a grab. And then he doesn't sit up, but he just, eyes had been closed for a couple of days, just opens his eyes and just smiles, and he's gone. These are little grace moments too that remind us, of the beauty of a happy, holy death that are present to us, and that keeps in mind this presenting. And that's what we did. We were there to help present him, her, to our Lord. We shared in this moment of leaving this world to enter into the world with our Lord. That's our prayer. That's our hope. It's our strength.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So sorry to be a little longer.
No, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you also just for today's conversation, Father. I hope our audience enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the stories as well. But I hope it was an educational episode that's helpful when looking at this. So
thank you, Colleen. Look forward to the next moment.
I do too as well.
And I know you're going to put in the show notes, maybe you can link to the Catholic Medical Association, to the National Catholic Bioethics Center, just to have people have a chance where they can find Catholic medical directives, and also some guidance of how to approach.
Okay. Yeah, definitely, for sure. Thank you,
and
Father.
our ebook.
Yes, and our ebook. Thank you, Father.
You're welcome.
And to all of our audience, please like and subscribe. I'll put the links in the description for you. Please download the ebook. It's a really helpful framework for being able to approach this and understand the issues better. And yes, keep on living a culture of life. God bless.